I gifted my parents a $425,000 Seaside house for their 50th anniversary. When I arrived, my mother was crying and my father was trembling. My sister's family had taken over. Her husband stepped toward my dad, pointed at the door, and shouted, "This is my house. Get out." My sister laughed until I walked in, and suddenly the room went silent. I'm Thomas, 37, the eldest, the one who fixes things. I'm a neurosurgeon. My life is tracked in schedules and 4 a.m. pages. I live out of a locker at the hospital and a suitcase at home. I don't drink much, I run when I can, and I save almost everything I earn because I grew up learning the cost of overdrafts and delays. I've always been the one to translate adult panic. At 10, while mom cried over late rent, I'd say, "It'll be fine." I learned fear early. I learned to be useful. 2 weeks ago, my parents reached their 50th anniversary. I wanted them to experience a real win, a place where the air smelled like salt, floors didn't creak, and nothing reminded them of coupons or secondhand furniture. I found a small blue house by the water. Crooked, yes, but warm. White deck, 2 palms in front, windows that sang with the wind from the bay. $425,000. I closed it in their names, set up utilities, stocked the fridge, and left a note in the silverware drawer for mornings filled with laughter. I didn't tell anyone, not even my sister. On the day, I drove down with a cake and a bottle of sparkling cider. The ocean was clear, the sky perfect, and I felt genuinely happy. Then I saw another SUV in the driveway. The front door was open, the screen banging in the wind. I stepped inside. Mom held a dish towel like a white flag, her eyes red. Dad sat with shoulders hunched, hands shaking, surrounded by boxes. Loud voices came from the hallway. A child's cartoon played in the living room. I hadn't even turned it on. And then he appeared. My brother-in-law, Kyle. Barefoot, beer in hand, football shirt. He planted himself in front of my father, jabbed a finger, and yelled, "This is my house. Get out." From the couch, my sister Julia laughed. "Relax, Dad. We're just getting settled." The plastic cake lid dug into my palm. Something inside me went quiet. I should explain the backstory before this room became a battlefield. Julia is 2 years younger than me. She was always the artist, the free spirit, the one with the "it's just a rough patch" attitude. My parents sacrificed and minimized. I covered. Textbooks, tuition, down payments, braces, cars, co-signing leases. There are Venmo notes that read like diary entries. Every transfer felt like I was smoothing the edges of our family's chaos. Even my parents helped in quiet ways. Mom packed groceries in Julia's trunk, calling it cleaning out the pantry. Dad lent tools, letting Kyle practice repairs that cost more to fix later. The chorus never changed. "You're reliable, Thomas. Your sister isn't like you." During residency, I slept on call room mattresses and sent money over shaky Wi-Fi at 2 a.m. because the landlord threatened to change the locks. Somewhere along the line, I became a card everyone swiped without thinking about balance. When I found the Seaside house, I planned it like a surgery. The deed was in a trust with my parents as lifetime beneficiaries. Taxes prepaid for 20 years. HOA paid. Locks changed. Keys in my hand felt like holding a life raft. I told Mom and Dad 1 week in advance so they could process it privately. We drove down together. Dad touched the banister as if it were a violin. Mom opened each cabinet and exhaled. We sat on the deck, listening to gulls. "It's yours," I said. Dad's voice broke. Mom smiled. I stayed overnight to check the plumbing. Everything worked. The next morning, I returned to the city for surgery. The house stayed theirs. Then the system did what systems do. Julia called Mom. Day 2. "Are you at a beach? Whose house?" Mom, a terrible liar, said, "Visiting a friend." By dinner, Julia had triangulated the address from a blurry sunset photo on Dad's Facebook. She arrived with Kyle, 2 kids, a dog, and entitlement you could smell from the driveway. Mom later told me, voice small, "They just wanted to see it. Then they're staying for the weekend." I said, "It isn't a rental." She said we'd talk later. By Saturday, Dad was confused. Julia kept texting, "Family home, can you come?" Then came the call I didn't answer because I was scrubbed in. Then a selfie in my parents' kitchen. Home sweet home, #manifesting. Kyle added, "Finally, a place where the kids can be kids." My hand itched where I usually hold the scalpel. I texted Dad after surgery, "Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Love you." I drove straight there after discharge, rehearsing calm words. I walked into the open door. Kyle's voice was already up there. You two are old. Stairs are dangerous. This is a family house. We'll manage it. Mom tried to explain. It's Thomas's gift. He gave it to you. Kyle cut her off. Same difference. Julia smirked. Don't be dramatic, Mom. We'll handle the bookings. I looked at my father's hands. They were trembling, the same hands that once worked 3 jobs and still made it to my high school orchestra concert. Now he was being told to step aside in a house that was legally his. I set the cake on the counter, looking out of place among fast food bags and makeup kits. My voice stayed calm, measured. Who told you this is your house? I asked. Kyle rolled his eyes. Family money. Family house. Don't be weird. Julia added, sing song. We're not asking, Tommy. We're updating. Mom's face crumpled. Thomas, can you just explain? Julia pointed at Dad. He can explain from the porch. Something clicked in me. Surgical precision. Everyone, living room. Now. The kids paused their show. The dog stopped shredding a throw pillow. Kyle snorted but followed. People like him always assume the room belongs to them. I stood by the mantel under a framed photo of my parents cutting a supermarket cake 40 years ago. Pulse in my thumbs. I pulled a folder from my bag and laid out 5 documents on the coffee table. Deed, recorded last week. The property is owned by the trust, with my parents as lifetime beneficiaries and exclusive right of occupancy. Trust instrument. It gives me the duty to maintain the property for my parents' comfort and the obligation to remove anyone interfering. Airbnb listing, photos taken without permission, full description, house rules, availability calendar, and payouts to Kyle's account, blurred for the kids. Group chat transcript, Julia's message planning to guilt Dad and finalize the beach base. I blocked her from accessing it. HOA rules, clause clearly forbidding short-term rentals. I explained, here's what happens. You pack your things today. Delete the listing. Text everyone who booked. Issue refunds. Apologize to Mom and Dad for frightening them in their own home. Leave the keys on the table. Julia blinked. Then she laughed. Or what, Tommy? I will perform my duty as trustee, I said. Kyle stepped toward me. Duty this, he said, puffing his chest. Mom whispered, Kyle, please. I don't like yelling. I like precision. I stayed calm. I set my phone on the table, screen up. Drafted emails ready. HOA, council, county recorder, and Airbnb flagged for illegal use. Text thread open with a locksmith already nearby. Kyle hesitated. You wouldn't. I would, I said, and I already did. Julia reached for Mom. Mom looked at me instead. Thomas, she said, voice trembling, do what you need to do. Kyle's face changed. He pointed to the door again, the same defiance as before. Kyle's defiance didn't sway me. I remained calm, precise. Kyle, you've crossed the line. This house is legally and exclusively for my parents. You and Julia will leave immediately. He took a step forward, chest out, but I didn't flinch. I gestured to the documents on the table. The deed, the trust, the Airbnb listing, the chat logs, and the HOA rules, they weren't just paper. They were authority, evidence, control. Do you understand? I asked. Julia's sugary tone faltered. Thomas, you can't be serious. We're just helping. I tapped the Airbnb listing again. You call it helping. I call it breaking the rules. This is not a rental property. It's not yours to manage. It's for Mom and Dad. Mom whispered again, Thomas, please. She wasn't asking. She was giving me the green light. Kyle's jaw clenched. Julia reached for Mom. I stood firm. My voice remained calm but firm. You will pack. You will delete the listing. You will apologize. You will leave the keys on the table. Today. There was silence. Even the dog stopped moving. The children, sensing tension, sat quietly. Julia finally realized the seriousness of the situation. Kyle muttered, frustrated, fine, but it lacked confidence. Julia, now pale, began packing, realizing their plan had failed before it even began. I remained standing by the mantel, documents in place, as if the house itself had been my operating table. Everything planned, everything precise. This wasn't anger. It was control, clarity, and the duty I had to my parents. After they left, I reassured my parents. Dad exhaled deeply, holding the banister as if it were a lifeline. Mom smiled through tears, opening cabinets and running her fingers along the counters, breathing in the clean, salty air. The house returned to its intended peace. The children were outside playing, the dog resting, and my parents finally able to enjoy their home without intrusion. I explained to them how the trust worked, how the deed was secured, and how any future interference would be handled. They nodded, trusting me as they always had. In the end, the house stayed theirs. Their sanctuary, their 50th anniversary gift, untouched by entitlement or misunderstanding. Everything I had done, every plan, every late-night calculation, every small sacrifice led to this moment. My parents could finally relax. The air smelled like salt, the floors didn't squeak, and nothing reminded them of the past struggles. They were free to simply be. I stepped between Kyle and my father. My hands were steady, because I've held brains that pulsed like birds. "Point at my father again," I said quietly. "The only door you're going through is the one Victor is about to lock from the outside." Silence. Not even the cartoons. Julia tried one last angle. "You're cruel," she said. "You're abandoning your family." I exhaled. "I am done being your wallet. That's not abandonment. That's a boundary." Kyle muttered, "We'll see about that," and lunged for the folder. Maybe to grab the deed, maybe to rip it. I picked up the papers, tucked them away, and turned to Dad. "Would you like to stay in your living room?" I asked. He swallowed. "Yes." "Then everyone who doesn't live here, go pack." No one moved. The doorbell rang. Victor, right on time. It took 3 hours to restore order. Victor changed the deadbolt while Kyle threw a quiet tantrum in the driveway. The dog barked, the kids moved like shadows, and I stayed calm with Mom at the kitchen table, making tea. Mom whispered, "I didn't want it to come to this. I thought we could smooth it." They came fast. They said it would be easier for us this way. No stairs for Dad, less to clean. They said they'd take over the hard parts. "The hard parts are the parts that mean ours," I said. Dad stared at the water. "I thought I'd be stronger. I should have told them to leave." "You called me," I said. "That was the strong part." In the living room, I opened my laptop and canceled every illegal booking. Each customer was refunded. HOA rules attached for the one who threatened a review. A letter drafted for neighbors explaining there would be no short-term rentals at 24 Seaspray. Julia tried to reframe it 3 times. We were just excited for them. I wanted the kids around more. They're getting old. We have the energy. "You think money makes you the parent?" I said calmly. "I bought a house for our parents. I didn't buy a permission slip for you to steal." She flinched, then went cold. Kyle refused to hand over the key. "Come and take it," he smirked. Victor had already installed the keypad lock. I reprogrammed it to a code Dad chose. Kyle tried another angle. "You think you're clever with your papers? I know a guy. I know the county clerk." I said evenly, "Your guy is about to learn that a trust beats a tantrum." When they finally left with boxes, Julia paused on the porch. "You could have just talked to me." "I've been talking to you for 10 years, I said. "They'll regret this when they need help," she said. "I am around," I said. "For my parents." The dog yapped as they drove away. The house felt different. Same air, but lighter. I picked up stray items, tidied the space, and found a folded business plan from Kyle with Julia's note. "Tom won't say no if Mom cries." I set it aside like something sharp. Mom apologized for the mess. I said, "It's just crumbs." Dad finally spoke. "I don't know how to say this without sounding like I failed you both." "You didn't fail us," I said. "You gave everything you had. You just gave too much to her for too long." We all did. We ate dinner on the deck. Mom told a story about her first apartment and a mouse named Bernard. Dad laughed. The laugh he only gives when he's not worried for anyone else. Julia sent messages, tried emotional leverage, posted memes. None of it changed the house. I set up an alarm system, a porch camera with a cheerful chime, and organized all trust documents in a drawer labeled boring armor. Mom said softly, "I'm going to talk to your sister, not to argue, to say no. Not choosing, just stopping the pretending." Dad added, "I should have taught that better. I taught you to work. You taught me to love and stay." I tightened a gate latch, checked camera angles, and printed a small sign. "Welcome home, Sam and Ruth." Alone on the deck, I realized the point. Love is not covering bad behavior. It isn't rewarding chaos because someone shares your blood. Love is a house with good light and doors that lock. Love is paperwork that protects when people don't. Love is boundaries that preserve peace without cruelty. 2 weekends later, I drove down early. Pancakes burned, laughter flowing, quiet morning conversations. No Julia. Just my parents breathing easy, enjoying their home. The house stands. The locks click. The windows sing with the bay wind. My parents rest. Boundaries kept the porch light on, and that's what love looks like.